So, the Legion of the Damned. What could be cooler than Space Marines covered in flames and skulls? Now, they're not so much of a thing at the moment, but I'm sure sooner or later Games Workshop's going to come back to them in a big way for Warhammer 40,000. But in the meantime, they offer a really cool opportunity for a unique Space Marine army that you could paint, and they give a great opportunity for some fantastic conversions too. So in this video, what we're going to do is give you some great ideas on how you can make your very own Legion of the Damned. So for the core of this conversion, I've decided not to use a Primaris Space Marine, and that's because in the lore, the Legion of the Damned are presented as some sort of archaic chapter that was lost in the warp or something like that long ago, so it doesn't make sense to have Primaris bits on there to me. So instead, what I want to go for is Firstborn Space Marines. Now, if you like the look of Firstborn Marines, then what you should do is check out Space Marine Heroes, especially if you want them to look more modern, because the Space Marine Heroes figures, when they did the Firstborn ones, scale very well compared to modern miniatures. They're about the same sort of size as the Chaos Space Marines, which makes sense. The one I'm going to be using for this video as the core of it is this one right here. This guy was called Brother Dolor when he first came out, and he's in blue plastic because this one was from Series 1 where they were themed as Ultramarines, but it was redone in red plastic more recently under a different name, but it's the exact same sculpt. Now this one's ideal because the size of the parts on there are all the exact same size as the other Space Marines in this kind of armour, so the arms and heads, things like that is what I'm talking about here. So we can use those parts to customise this miniature and make it nice and different and perfect for the Legion of the Damned. Now whilst I have built this miniature, I haven't actually glued it together because these were push fit. So you can see I can still separate all the parts. And that's exactly what I'm going to do because I've not yet removed the mould line. So we need to take those off and the little nubs where it came with the sprue too. And actually for this part, all I'm interested in is the legs and the centre of the body. Everything else we're going to replace with something else. So all these extra parts will go in the bits box. So what I'm going to do now is just separate all these pieces. And then what we can do is get it all ready, glued together, and then start doing some converting. And here's the body now built up, glued together, and all the mould lines cleaned up. And you can see I've also taken off the pegs there at the arms because we're going to replace those with some different arms later on. But now what I want to do is some alterations onto the breastplate of the armour, because something I thought that was really cool in the old Legion of the Damned miniatures was when they had ribs on there. So we're going to do that on this miniature just here. So to do it, what I'm going to do is begin by carefully removing the laurel wreath design that appears on there whilst being careful to avoid the skull. So I'm just going to clip it away. And then once that's been removed, I'm going to use a sanding stick just to file it smooth. And there we go, it's been removed and everything is nice and smooth, and we've still got that skull in the centre. So now what we're going to do is sculpt on some ribs on either side of that skull. And to do this, I'm going to use some green stuff. Now, if you've never used green stuff before, what you'll find when you get a packet of it is that it comes out looking like this. So you get strips like this where you've got the yellow and the blue. And the idea is to mash the two colours together to make it green, and then over the course of, say, 4 or 5 hours, it'll start to harden. So what we need to do is cut some out. And to do this, I'm going to be using my sculpting tool just here. Now, generally what I think is best to do is to use slightly more yellow than blue, because this tends to make the green stuff a bit more pliable. Now, luckily this pack definitely has that, so I think it's a pretty good combination we've got here. What you need to do is just chop it out there like that. Now, first thing to do once you've got your little bit cut out is remove the part where the two colours are touching, because there'll be a thin sliver just here where it's already cured. So you just want to get rid of that, and then that can just be thrown away there. So what you want is two pieces kind of like that, and once you've got those cut out, it's just a matter of mashing them together. So what you've got to do is just get them really mixed in there like that, and then just start pushing them until you get into an even green. So here we go, the green stuff is now that nice even green. So what we need to do is start out by just twisting off a small amount. So really very much, just a small little blob there like that is good to get started with. And what we're going to do is apply this onto the breastplate of the Space Marine. So what we're going to do is the same thing on both sides, but I'll focus on just this side for the moment. And what we're going to do is just put it on right in the middle and then just start pressing it on there so it starts to adhere to it. And it's from this point that we'll need to use the sculpting tool to start pressing that down. Now the thing is, if we just go straight at it with a sculpting tool, it'll probably stick to it and then come off the miniature. So we need to prepare it. And a great way of doing that is just to use some E45 cream. Basically what we do is put a little bit of this onto the end of the sculpting tool, and it just stops the green stuff from sticking to it. So all we need to do is just get a small amount on there like that, and then it's just a matter of just putting it on the front of it there like that. So with that prepared then, all we need to do is start pressing this on, so just smoothing it down so it covers the front of the breastplate. I'm going to be doing this on both sides just to get things going. I've now got that green stuff on there and it looks something like a bow tie, but it's in the right place where we need it because now I'm going to start sculpting the ribs into that green stuff. And for this, I'm going to be using the sculpting tool again, but what I have done is apply that E45 cream to the blade side this time. And what I'm going to do is just gently start applying this into the green stuff to mark out the ribs. So for example, if I start here, I'm just going to begin in this area here, just gently scoring it on to get that indent that we want to go for. So just there like that. Now the plan is try and get 4 on either side. So that'll be the first one roughly up there. And the second one's going to be going around about the middle, just there. Then we'll do one more line a bit further down like this. So with this initial scoring in place, it's then just a matter of working into it and making these ridges a bit deeper and then pushing the green stuff around to be the right kind of shape. So from here, I'm just going to start gently pressing in to get the general shape of these ribs. And there we have it, some ribs sculpted there on the breastplate. Now the green stuff's going to take around about 4 or 5 hours or so to cure completely. So in the meantime, you can carry on if you want to, just being really careful, or you can let it dry. I do recommend you let it dry, but when you're ready, the next thing to do is going to be to start stick on the arms. Now for this miniature here, I'm going to go for the classic combination for a Space Marine Sergeant. So first of all, I'm going to glue on a chainsword, followed by a bolt pistol. And there we go, the arms are glued on. I adjusted the chainsword ever so slightly, but I'm really happy with that pose. And actually, these parts are all from the Space Marine Tactical Squad kit, which funnily enough, you can still get. However, these parts were just spare to my bits box, and you can easily get parts like this online from bits traders and things. If you just want a few bits and pieces like that, that's definitely the way to go. So check out things like eBay and stuff like that. And in fact, that's exactly where I've got the next parts we're going to be using, because now we need to put the shoulder plates on there. Now, the first shoulder pad is going to be a smooth one, which is again from the Tactical Squad kit, and this is another I had spare in my bits box. But the other one is from the Chaos Space Marine kit, and this one's really cool, tons of skulls on it. I have removed a horn, but this one is just going to go onto the arm holding the chainsword. Now the shoulder pads are on there. The next thing to do is prepare the backpack, and once again I'm using one from the Tactical Squad set, so again you can get these off bits traders, and the plan is to replace the vents that appear on it with some skulls. Now you can get the skull set from Citadel, but these ones are quite small, I think a little bit too small for our purposes here, so instead I've gone for the chunkier ones that appear in Tomb King sets. Now again, I don't recommend you buy a whole Tomb King set for these, but instead look on bits traders, you can easily get these online. The skulls that I'm going to be using are these sorts of ones here that don't have the jaw on them, so these little ones here, and you can see they're around about the same size as the nodules that we've got on the side of the backpack just said. So the plan is to replace them there. So to do this, what we're going to have to do is start out by removing those vents, and to do this I'm just going to gradually clip away at them, just cut them away and then using the sanding stick to file them smooth where you get the little rod coming out of the backpack. With that done, we can then glue on the skulls, and these I've just sanded the back of them ever so slightly to make them a little bit flatter, and these just glue into place. With that done, we can then stick the backpack onto the Space Marine. And there we go, the backpack's now glued securely in place, so it's time to add a helmet onto our Legion of the Damned Space Marine here. And as this guy's turning out to be a sergeant, I thought it'd be cool here to do a skull helmet. So once again, I've gone through the bits box to find a spare. Now if you're doing a whole unit, again I don't recommend you do every guy like this, but it's a nice thing for a sergeant, and I did find a spare one. It's actually an extra from a Space Marine chaplain on a bike. Now once again, I don't recommend you go and buy a kit for a little head like that. Instead, just check out bits traders, because loads of Space Marine chaplains have spare helmets. There's plenty around that you can pick up pretty cheap. And once you've got one that you like, it's just a matter of getting it ready. Now, the one I'm going to be using is this one specifically, and it does have a hole in the back of it designed for a little fitting from the chaplain. I have filled that in with green stuff and just smoothed that down, so that is nice and cured. And so now we can glue the head into place. So for this, just going to put a little bit of plastic glue into the neck joint and then pop the head into place and just pose it so it's looking menacingly down the battlefield. With that head glued in, the miniature's very nearly completed, but as this guy is like a sergeant, I thought it'd be cool now to add something like a back banner on his backpack. And rather than a banner, I thought it'd be really cool to have a burning brazier with some fire on there. And so once again, I've been through the bits box, and the part that I've found is actually from a corpse cart. And I've had this piece in my bits box forever and ever. It's this one here, and this is going to be ideal because all we need to do is remove this pole. So to do this, what I'm going to do is just clip that away and make sure it's nice and smooth. And then it's just a matter of gluing it onto the flat surface on top of the backpack and then leaving it to dry. And whilst it's drying, if you're building a miniature like this and you want some tips and tricks, then what you should do is check out duncanrhodes.com, which is our home on the internet packed with well over 450 tutorials covering all sorts of different subjects in the hobby. We've got lots of long form videos on all kinds of spooky monsters and creatures, but also shorter videos that focus on particular techniques to really help you practice and master them. Now, in addition to this, all the miniatures we paint feature in our reference gallery, so you can see them clearly from all different angles to guide you through the process of painting them, and you get full access to our community, including our forum and our members-only Discord too. Every month we run giveaways, and we also have a painting competition as well, so you can challenge yourself. So if you're looking to learn some new techniques, go and check it out. And here he is, all fully built and ready to be painted. Now, when it comes to painting this guy, I've decided I'm going to start from a grey undercoat, which might seem a little bit strange at first glance, but it's because I like it as a starting point for all the colours we're going to be using here, even though he will be predominantly black. So what I'm going to do now is go outside and spray him with standard grey from the Colour Forge, and when we come back, we'll start painting him. And here he is, undercoated grey and ready to go. So the first thing that I'm going to do is base coat his armour with a black. And I want a pitch black here, so I'm going to be using some Doom Death black. And because we just need to cover quite a bit of ground quite quickly, a rough base coating brush is going to be ideal. So for that reason, I'm using a medium base coat brush here from Citadel. And it's a matter of just getting that paint thinned down with a touch of water, and then we can start blocking in all the armour. Now for this early stage, I'm not concerned about details that are going to be a different colour, because we can clean up as we add further base coats onto the model. Instead, I'm just going to focus on making sure the black gets in all the nooks and crannies as we go, and I'm also going to make sure I paint the weapon casings at this stage as well. Now we've got that smooth, consistent black on the miniature, we can move on to applying another base coat, and at this stage what I think is good to put in is going to be the silver details. So here I'm going to go for some Surcoat Silver, and to apply it I'm going to use a size 1 brush from Artis Opus, so roughly the same sort of size as a medium layer brush from Citadel. Whichever you choose, you just want a brush that's going to hold a good point here, because we need a degree of accuracy as this is blocked in. Because once that paint's thinned down with that touch of water, it's now time to start looking for any mechanical details that might appear on the Space Marine. Also any armoured cables and things like that. So for example, on his helmet we've got these cables on the side of it, so I'm going to be picking out details such as this, and you can see we just need that accuracy whenever we get close to any black that we want to keep. So just there, for example. In addition, we're going to be looking out for things like vents and things, such as these ones we've got down here on the backpack, and the silver details that appear on the weaponry too, such as the chainsword, where we've got the teeth and the motor to do. So just around here like this. In addition, I'm going to be looking out for any trim, and there is some on this shoulder plate, so I'm going to base coat this at this stage as well. Now the silver's blocked in, we can apply a wash over the top, and here I'm going to go for a black wash for a nice clean appearance to it. So for this I'm using Oblivion Black Wash, and to apply it I'm going to stick to the same brush, so that's size 1 once again, because here I just want to make sure we focus this wash just on those silver details and keep off that black armour. So all you need to do is load up a small amount on the brush, don't need tons and tons, and then we can start painting it directly over the top of the silver. What we want to do is just wash it over so it runs into the recesses and gives us that shading. So for example there on the pipes, and also on the trim of this shoulder pad as well. Now the wash is dry, I'm going to move on to applying a few more base coats that are all moving towards using the same colour wash, and this time that's going to be a dark brown wash. So the first of these is going to be for all the bone details, and here I'm going to be using some Dragon Fang for the base coat. Now once that's done, it's then going to be time to pick out any leather and also the joints in the armour with a sort of greyish brown colour. So I'm going to use some Eidolon Grey for this, then finally we can pick out the purity seal, of which we've got one, and there's a bit of wax on there that needs to be red, so here I'm going to use some Asmodeus Red. But first of all I'm going to base coat using some Dragon Fang, and to apply it I'm sticking to my size 1 brush here, and this is going to be for all the bones and skulls, but also any parchment on the miniature too, and there is a little bit. So with the paint thin and ready, we can start picking these parts out. And we've got details such as the skull helmet, where it's a matter of just taking our time around here, being careful not to catch any of the black or silver detail. Now in addition, it's going to be things such as the rib cage that we sculpted on earlier on, so these bones just standing out just here, and as I mentioned, the parchment on this purity seal down here. Next up, it's time to move on to a brownish grey. So here I've got some Eidolon Grey, and first of all, this is going to be for any leather, such as these pouches we've got just here. But in addition, this is a perfect colour for the soft joints in the armour, such as around the back of the legs just here. And then finally, we just need a small amount of a dark red. So here I've got some Asmodeus Red, and this is for the wax of the purity seal. With that, we're now at the stage where we can apply the brown wash over these colours. So here I'm going to be using some Battle Mud wash, and to apply it, I'm going for a slightly smaller brush now. A size 0 is what I'm going to use because we just need to keep this under control and again off the surrounding details that we've done so far, so avoiding the black and the silver. So I'm not going to load up loads at once, so it's going to stay under that control, and then it's a matter of just neatly painting this straight over these 3 colours. So we're looking at the bone, but also the sort of brownish grey that we've got and the red as well, and all we need to do is paint it straight over the top, making sure it runs into all those recesses. With that wash now dry, we've got shading on those colours, so we can move on to the next phase, which is going to be to start to paint in the flames. Now, the reason why we're doing this now is because we want to do it before the highlighting of the black armour, just to make sure that we don't highlight any parts on the black that we then later on paint over with the flames. And for this, we need to start out with a darker red, so I'm going to use Asmodeus Red once again. And to apply it, I'm going for my size 0 brush here, but really what you want is a brush that just holds a good point, so you have lots of accuracy as you paint this in. Now, there are a few details we can paint red at this point, because we've got some other features that are going to be fire-like that we need to do. The first is, of course, the actual fire that appears on the top of that brazier on the backpack. So you can see all the flames here. It's going to base coat all this with Asmodeus Red at this stage. Also, I'm going to pick out the eyes too. So just brace your hands to be as steady as possible. You see we've got the lenses just here. We just want to gently go in and just block these in at this stage there like that. But the main thing is, of course, the flames that are painted onto the armour. And for doing these, what we need to do is just make sure you've got that good point on your brush and pick a central point. So, for example, this shoulder plate just here, I'm going to be starting in the middle. What I like to do is just paint a rough line just down the middle there like that as a guidance point that we can then work the flames out from. So just there like that. It also means you can control how high you want them to be. Once you're happy with that, we can then start building them up. And the process is basically just to do a wiggle on either side of this line. So I'm just going to start on there. Just bring the brush around and paint almost like an S shape there, like that. And then we can bulk that out on the other side, just going around there, gradually getting wider all the way down to the bottom there, like that. So really then, it's just a matter of doing this all the way around. And once you get into a rhythm, it actually gets very straightforward. So again, it's just a process of picking that central line, just choosing how far you want it to go up. So there, for example, and then again, just bulking it out. But remember, if you do happen to make any mistakes, don't worry about it. Just jump back to that original black that you used and use that to clean up, and then you're ready to continue. And there we have that pattern blocked in, and you can see I added a few little loose flames just flickering off the main ones just higher up just there, just to add a bit more character to it, and also put some flames on the front of the legs down there too. And so with that done, we can now do a little bit of layering because that bone needs to be cleaned up before we highlight it. So for this, I'm going to use some Skeleton Legion, and to apply it, I'm going for the size 0 brush once again, but really you just want a brush that's going to hold a good point. So with this paint, we need to thin it down so it's a little bit translucent, just adding small amounts of water at a time until we're down to about this sort of consistency. Then remove the excess paint off your brush so that you keep that fine point, and then we can start reapplying a colour onto the bone areas. So for example, if we take a look at the helmet, we're now looking for the parts that are raised up and flatter and just want to be careful to avoid recesses. So as we work around the eye just here, you can see I'm being careful not to drop into the corner where it goes towards that red. As we get round here, we've got the recess between the teeth design here, so I'm just going to make sure we focus on the flat raised up parts and not drop into those darker regions. Same's true as we come around to the top just here. You can see there's almost a furrowed brow designed into the skull. So we just want to make sure we follow that around, just going along there, leaving that little recess darker once again and carrying on again on the other side. And with that layering now done, you can see the miniatures really looking the part of a Legion of the Damned Space Marine. And so we can move on to the next phase, which is going to be to highlight it. Now, when it comes to highlighting a model like this, it's usually best to start out with the main colour, which is going to be the black. So for this, what I'm going to do is take some inspiration from the official miniatures that Games Workshop painted many years ago, and that's to highlight with some quite cold colours. So we're looking at blues here. So I'm going to be starting out by using some Faust Blue for the first edge highlight. And to apply it, you want to go for a really fine brush for this sort of thing. So I'm using a size 00 now, which is about the same sort of size as a small layer brush from Citadel. And the trick is to thin the paint down to the correct consistency. You want it to be runny that it flows easily off the brush, but not so runny that it flows out of control. It's a bit of a balancing act to find that point, but once you've got the hang of it, it's very easy to get to it. It's basically like this, and you can always test it on your palette by having a go at painting some lines. And if it flows easily like that, then you're down at the right point. So next thing to do is remove excess paint off your brush and load up a small amount fresh, because this way you'll get that good point on the bristles. And then we're looking for all the edges and angles that appear on the armour. So for example, if we take a look at the arm around here, we're looking for all the sharp corners, such as here on the elbow, and these don't stand out massively. So what we're going to do is paint this colour on with a downward motion on the brush, using the tip of it to follow along the outer edge as closely as possible to get that sharp line following it. And by doing this, we just start to emphasise all these angles. So once again, this one here is going to use the tip of the brush to paint downwards, just following it along as neatly as possible, always changing the angle of the miniature to make sure that you're comfortable as you go. Now sometimes these edges actually really stand out, and in these cases you can do this with the side of the brush instead, which is nice and quick and easy to do. For example, on the backs of the legs just here, you can see this angle, easy to catch it with the side of the brush. All we do is just skim along like this to get a highlight along those edges. And here we have the miniature with that highlight applied to all the black armour and weaponry. And you can see by going for that cold highlight there, we've got a nice contrast starting to build against the hotness of the flames. But what we can do is take it a little bit further to help it pop out a little bit more, because right now that highlight's quite subtle. So what we're going to do is add a second edge highlight, a bit finer, a bit more selective this time, using some shadow blue. And then we're going to move on to some Carcharodon Grey. So a light grey here for a very small highlight on that black armour, but mainly for all the joints and things that we did with Eidolon Grey earlier on. But first of all, we need some shadow blue, and to apply it I'm sticking to the same brush, so it's the size 00 once again, and here we just need to set the paint up in the same way, making sure we thin it down the palette so it's a little bit translucent, but more importantly flowing easily from the brush. Then remember, remove the excess paint off your brush, load up a small amount fresh to make sure you have that good point on the bristles, and then ready to start highlighting again. And this time we're looking for the more prominent edges that stand out more. So for example, if we go back to the arm just here, rather than doing the whole area on this elbow pad, instead what we're going to do is concentrate towards the top where the light would catch it. So just a little flick along there, retracing our steps essentially, just a bit there and then a bit down the side there like that. So you can see it's not doing everything, instead it's just looking for the more prominent edges and focusing on those. And now that's done, we can move on to adding a lighter grey. So here I'm using some Carcharodon Grey, and this can first of all be an optional very fine highlight in the black armour, and if you decide to do this, just skim a very small amount onto the most prominent parts that stand out, such as the tops of the knees right here. But mainly this is going to be a highlight for the other black that we used, so that Eidolon Grey, such as on the joints around here. When it comes to these, just angle the miniature so that you're nice and comfortable, and paint in a downward motion like this, just picking out the peaks of these lines that we've got. So for example, just along here. And with that done, the black power armour is now fully highlighted, as are the off-black details we did on those joints, and also I use that light grey to highlight the leather pouches too. And so now we can move on to highlighting two other important colours on the miniature, the first of which is going to be that silver. For this I'm going to use some mithril blade, but then we should move on to highlighting the bone, and here you just want a light bone colour, so I'm going to use some vampire fang. We'll start out with mithril blade, and to apply it I'm going for the same brush again, so the size 00, because it's going to be very much the same technique here. We're looking for all those sharp edges and angles and just want to pick those out. But we also want to keep an eye out for any studs on the miniature and get those too. So with the paint thinned and ready, we can start looking for these features, and it's going to be things such as the trim that we've got on this shoulder plate just here, where I'm just going to approach the side of the brush and skim along like this. But also I'm going to be keeping an eye out for any rivets and studs and things like that, such as these ones we got on the front of the knee, and we just want to pick these out very neatly as well. And then finally, we just need a touch of some vampire fang to highlight the bone details. And here, first of all, we're looking for all the sharp edges and ridges, such as around the eye socket just here. We just want to follow along as neatly as possible, so kind of edge highlighting once again, but also on the smoother areas, such as on top of the skulls, we can just apply a thin coat of this. Now I have thinned this down a little bit more, and all we're going to do is just apply a very thin glaze just along the top of the skull right here. And with those highlights applied, the miniature's well on the way to being finished. All we need to do is paint in all those fire effects. And to do this, we're going to start out with a bright red now. I'm going to use some demon red for this. And to apply it, I'm sticking to the small brush, so the size 00 here, because we're going to need quite a bit of accuracy with some of these details. And there are a few bits to pick out here. So as usual, I'm just going to thin this paint down to make sure it's nice and smooth. And then to begin with, I'm going to use this on the eyes of the miniature, because now what we want to do is make them much brighter towards the middle. So for this sort of thing, just brace your hands to be as steady as possible and introduce this colour towards the middle of each lens. So there like that, leaving it darker around the outside. In addition, we've got the flames on top here. And for this, what I'm going to be doing is mostly applying this towards the base of the fire, just leaving some of that darker red showing towards the tips of it. So kind of painting it up in lines like this, just really concentrating the colour towards the bottom, but not going all the way up to the end. But then, of course, the real important thing is to paint the flames that appear on the armour plating. And for this, we want the colour to get warmer towards the bottom of the fire effect. So for this first one, we're largely going to be retracing it, but just leaving it a little bit of the dark red still showing. So kind of mirroring that original pattern that we've got like this, just making sure you just allow that dark red still show towards the top in that region just there. So it's just a matter of applying the colour in this downward motion, just taking your time and being as neat as possible. Once that colour's been applied, you can see the fire is now starting to look nice and hot, but we do need to take it further. So what we'll do now is move into an orange, and here I'm going to use some orange flare, and then this can be followed up by a bright yellow. For this, I'm going to use some yellow flame. Once that's done, we can then add a touch of white with some white star, and then on that fire on the backpack, just want a little bit of smoke on the very end of it. So for this, we can use a small amount of Doom Death Black. But first of all, we need some orange flare, and to apply it, I'm sticking to the same brush here for the same sort of application, because again, we need that accuracy. All we've got to do is get some of this thinned down and ready, and then we're going to be applying it over the fire once again, but this time just a little bit further down so that some of that red shows through above it. To begin with though, I am going to add a touch more of this to the eyes. So with the paint thinned and prepared, we can do that first of all. And this time we're aiming for a slightly smaller amount just towards the middle and the bottom of each eye. So we're looking at around about this region just here, just a little touch there like that. Then when it comes to the fire on the back, this is going to be the same sort of process, but again, just going a little bit further down now. So we're focusing more about this sort of region just here. It's just a matter of building that up. Just going towards lines as we get further up there like that. And then, of course, we do have the flames on the armour. Now for these, we're again looking to go a little bit further down, but the goal here is to make the orange fairly dominant on these parts. So we're looking at going to about this point just here this time. Just bring it down, again, following that general shape with lines of this colour, and then broadening it out as we get further down. We're now ready to move on to a yellow. So here I've got some yellow flame, and once again I'm going to be applying it on the eyes first of all, just continuing that process of just building up that colour a little bit towards the bottom of each lens, so just down there. On the fire, once again we're looking to apply it towards the base of the flames, and in the recesses this time, so just paint it in that upward motion, following the fire there like that. But then of course we have the flames on the armour once again. Now for these ones, we're going to start out by applying this as an edge highlight, so just run it across the bottom of the armour panel, so just there like that. And then we want to bring it a little bit up onto the fire. Now this time we don't want to go quite as far because that orange needs to remain dominant. So we're looking at going towards the bottom around about here and just thinly applying it at the base of the flames. We're now ready to move on to a white. So here I've got some white star, and to begin with on the eyes, it's just a little touch at the very bottom of each lens now. So just there. On the flames, it's going to be a few touches into the deepest parts where they're just above the brazier just down here. And then for the flames on the shoulder plates, we're just looking to add a few little touches on the edge highlight where that yellow really comes down from the flickering flames. So for example, just a little bit there, and then just a little bit here. And then finally, all we need is a very small amount of Doom Death Black, and with this we just need to add a small touch of it onto the tip of the flames just to give the impression of smoke coming off them. And with this done, the miniature is then ready to have the base painted, and as he's standing on lots of cracked concrete, I'm going to be painting it as an urban rubble base. And with the base now fully painted, this damned Legionnaire is complete and ready to save heroes of the Imperium in their hour of direst need. So this has been really fun building and painting this miniature, and I hope it's inspired you to have a go as well. If you decide you are going to try something like this, remember bits traders are your friends. There's various websites that do this, and also there's things like eBay too. Just check those out, because what you're looking for are skulls and also bits of Space Marine armor with skulls on them. Now also in this video we used one of the Space Marine heroes as the core body here, and that's because they're wearing the Firstborn style of armor with a suit of Mark 7. It's definitely worth checking that out if you like this style of Space Marine, because they're slightly larger scale than the old ones, meaning they match the modern figures and they look really cool on the battlefield. So we really hope this video has given you some inspiration, and we'll see you again very soon.